Welcome everyone to Communicating for Connections. My name is Debbie Marcusson. I'm from the Chancellor's Office in the Learning and Development Department. Just a little bit about me. I oversee the CHRS project, which I'm sure you've heard about, as well as the learning management system, CSU Learn, across all 23 campuses. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about communicating and how do we make those connections while we're communicating. So if you look at this graphic, you'll see, we have this miscommunication sometimes. I don't know. What do you mean? What do you mean? I don't know. What do you mean? And so we sometimes cannot make those connections because we're not being very clear. It could have to do with the way we're speaking. It could be our nonverbal communication. We have to understand how we all have different filters, as well as the different backgrounds that we come from. So today we're going to talk about what are the types of communications that we have? What are the types of listening skills we need? Understanding our filters is really a big way to make sure that we can make those connections with others. And we want to listen to understand. Empathy is important. And how do we make those connections? What we're going to do next is a little activity. And you're going to open another browser. And in the browser, I'm going to put in the chat, there's going to be a link, and you're going to go to a Miro board. A Miro board is just a whiteboard, and you're going to be able to do this activity right at your computer. I also listed the link on the slide if you wanted to type it in. We're going to do an activity called What the Duck. Yes, it is a funny name. Everybody should be able to get to the Miro board. I'll give you a few minutes. When you get to the Miro board, you're going to see this picture right here where there's a bunch of little squares and a whole bunch of little Lego pieces within each square. I'm going to give you a few minutes to get there, or a few seconds to get there. And I'm going to show you a quick little video tutorial, and I'm going to walk you through what you're going to do. When you get to the Miro screen, you're going to see all the squares. You're going to come down to the bottom right, and you're going to zoom in on one of the squares. Now make sure you pick a square that nobody else has. On the left there, you're going to pick the arrow, and that way you can pick the Lego pieces. And there's 6 pieces. Now build your duck. Don't copy the black duck that you're seeing right here. Build a duck whatever you think it should be. And you can move the pieces any way you want. There's actually a rotating one, and there's over 100 squares here, so there's plenty of squares for everybody to choose their own square. After you make your duck, I want you to zoom out a little bit, and you can go and use your mouse, and you can kind of look at what everybody else that's participating in this workshop and what their duck looks like. After you zoomed out, you probably saw a bunch of different ducks. And now you see on my slide, I kind of taken some examples of a previous workshop I did of all the types of ducks that people have made. I've done this activity in person as well as virtually. And we are all different ducks. And so if you look at the picture and you look at the Miro whiteboard where you went with all the other participants, you'll see, and I will be, put money on this, and I'm a betting person, that no one has the exact same duck. And the reason we do not have the same duck is we all visualized it differently. We took the parts and we put it in whatever we thought that duck was supposed to look like. And what that duck tells us about us is that, again, we're all different ducks. Now you're probably wondering, what do ducks and different ducks have to do with communicating and making those connections? It has everything to do with how we make those connections. The connections is influenced by how we see things, how we interpret, how do we visualize. And so when we're communicating with others, we need to understand that we're all different ducks, and we have to use certain tactics, skills, and techniques in order to make those connections and then ensure that our communication is being effective. So very basic, what is communication? So you're probably thinking, well, I know what communication is. We're talking. I'm communicating to you right now, right? And you're listening, I'm speaking. The basic answer is transferring of information from one person, one place, or one group to another. And so you basically get the message, you send it to the receiver, the receiver gets it, then they provide feedback. Say example of an email, you type out your message, you send it to the receiver reads the email, they type a response. At least we hope they type a response. And then it could go back and forth. Same with verbal, it could be visual as well. So the types of communication, of course, verbal. If you're listening right now and you hear me, this is verbal communication. And then we have nonverbal communication. I'm using my hands, that could be part of nonverbal. I nodded my head right there, nonverbal. And so there's a lot of different ways to communicate in the different body language. And then also visual, you know, how are we doing things visually? If I am showing you a picture right now, and if you look at the pictures on the slides, we have the smiley face with the zipper. That means, okay, that's a visual representation of nonverbal. We have the two people doing the blah, blah, blah. That's a representation of verbal communication, the I, etc. And then the last form of types of communication is written. And again, formal, informal. It could be a formal email, a letter that you're writing, a correspondence, or of course the informal, which is if you're out there tweeting or on your Facebook, Instagram, etc. So there's different ways you can communicate informally and formally. One of the things we want to look at, though, before we even talk about how do we make those connections, the first way to make the connection has to do with listening. There's three types of listening. One is not listening. I'm sitting here, I'm looking at you, and I'm not listening to a word you're saying. I'm thinking about the baseball game I'm going to go to later. Or I'm thinking about, hey, that's a really good movie, I need to go see that. I am not listening at all. So it's a very basic definition of not listening. The second one is head listening. And we're going to get into that in just a minute here. And then the third one, and we're going to talk about that as well, is listening to understand. Listening is one of the main keys to communicating and making those connections. So we know not listening, you are not going to make any connections if you're not listening to the person, whether it's verbal, nonverbal, written, all right, visual, whatever you're doing, you're not paying attention at all, that's not going to be helpful in making any connections. We want to go to head listening. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, head listening, right? What is head listening? Is that just me doing this in a meeting? It could be. All right, but there's more to head listening, and I'm going to give you a little scenario right now, and I'm going to talk through. I'm going to do a story. I'm the manager. I'm conducting a team meeting. This is our group, if you can see on the slide, and I want you to pay attention to the nonverbal communication that I'm going to pop up while I'm speaking. So you're going to listen to my words, and then you're going to look at the screen and see the pop-ups. All right, so we're in a team meeting. I've brought you all in for this team meeting. Thank you for coming today. I want to review part of our strategy to help streamline the process for our students to seek assistance. I want to implement a new intake form. The form will provide details on the needs of our students. I would like to spend more time going over this form to gather your feedback. Our students are why we were here, and your insights on how to best gather this information is crucial to our success. As you watched and listened, all of these thoughts were coming from the people in your group, your team. That is called head listening. Head listening means we have already started our story. We've already jumped to the conclusions. We said, I don't have time for this. Why are you speaking? So you're not even listening to what the person has to say. You're saying this will never work. We don't have time. You're filling in the gaps. You're creating your own story. And that's called head listening. And we're all guilty of it. We've all been in meetings where somebody's speaking again and you're like, didn't we do this before? And when you start having that head listening pop into your head, you've already tuned out and you're not going to make those connections. So we want to make sure that we do not get stuck in head listening. So some of the things we want to make sure, we want to, we're making assumptions. We want to not make assumptions, right? We want to say, okay, they were talking about this form. We did it a few months ago. Maybe the form's different now. Let's not assume it's the same. We don't implicit bias. Think about some of the biases you may have, right? It could be lots of different reasons. Could be something you had a bad experience with the person that came up with the form. And so you've already said, this is never going to work. They don't know what they're doing. And so you want to pay attention to those things. You're creating your own story, as I said. As you're head listening, you're creating your own story. Stop creating your own story. Don't jump ahead. That goes back to making assumptions. And we get distracted. Sometimes you're head listening. And again, it goes back to earlier when I said, you're thinking about where you're going to go for happy hour that night, or you're thinking about where you're going to go for dinner, or it's Friday and what am I going to do this weekend? You're, have your phone next to you and your phone's getting you distracted. So there's lots of ways where you could just be in the fog. You hear what they're saying, but you're really not paying attention and you're just doing something that's distracted in your head. As we move on, and we want to be active in our listening, right? And so part of that is listening to understand. So now another activity we're going to do right now, and what I would like you to do, and this is on your honor, right? I want everybody to close their eyes, and I want you to listen to the story I'm about to tell you. And then I'm going to ask you a question at the end. You are the bus driver. At stop number 1, 3 people get on the bus. One of them was wearing a red hat. At stop number 2, 4 people got on the bus and 1 got off. At stop number 3, 2 people got on. 1 person was carrying a bag and the person with the red hat got off. At stop number 4, the person carrying the bag got off the bus and 2 more people got on the bus. At the very last stop, everybody exited the bus, including the driver. What is the bus driver's age? Now, as we're doing this right now, you're probably thinking, what is the bus driver's age? Is this a math problem? 4 people got on, 2 people, then somebody got off, somebody was had a red hat. Am I supposed to know what they're wearing? How would I know their age? If you were listening to understand the story, the very first sentence I said, you are the bus driver. So however old you are is the age of the bus driver. We tend to jump to conclusions, and all the workshops that I've done with this and read this story, and people solicit their responses to me, it is people are writing down numbers. I've watched it in a class where they have their paper, 4, and then 2 and 3. They think it's a math problem. We didn't listen to the whole story. As soon as we said at stop number 1, 3 people got on, that's the only thing most people will focus on, is the numbers. So we want to make sure that we're actively listening to the entire story from start to finish. And that way you're going to get the whole story and you can listen to understand and come to the right conclusion, which is you are the bus driver, and that's how old the bus driver is. Of course, we never ask how old the bus driver is. You don't have to tell me how old the bus driver is. When we're listening, our filters will come in. And if we think about filters have to do with, it could be, our age, where we're at, younger, older, where we grew up, the experiences we have, the type of jobs we've done, the people we've interacted with, our family, our friends, our entire environment affects our filters. And so when I say the bus story, sometimes when people are very analytical, they are the ones that are definitely going to jump to it's a math problem. Their filter jumped in and said, focus on the numbers. And so to make those connections of listening to understand and listening to the entire story, as we listen to this story of the bus driver, we will have those filters that come in and influence what we hear. And so you want to make sure you're here now, listening to the entire story. But we also want to understand what our filters do. And we're going to dive into that a little bit right now. To listen fully, we have to be aware of and minimize our filters. Everybody was on the bus story, everybody was going with their previous experiences to maybe influence how to answer that question I asked you at the end. So to make connections, we're understanding our filters, which goes also back to the duck activity. When you did the duck activity in the beginning, your previous experiences of, have you seen a duck before? You spent a lot of time with ducks. You've seen them on pictures. Maybe you have Legos yourself and made a duck. So any of those things influence how you made your duck. That's where your filters come in. And that's okay because we're all different ducks. So I want you to look at this picture we have here. Take a good look at the picture. And the first thing I would like you to do is to think about the word scarcity. What does that mean? Some of you are probably thinking, well, it means it's not enough. Scarcity means there's never enough, less than. So I want you to get your hat. You have a hat right in front of you. Get your invisible hat. And I want you to put your scarcity hat on. You're thinking of not enough. Look at this picture on this slide. What do you see? Remember, scarcity, not enough, less than. It'll never be enough. So you're looking at this picture, look at the entire picture with your scarcity hat on, and think of some words of what this picture represents. Now, some of the things you might be looking at or thinking of is it's dry. It's empty. There's definitely no water. There's no food. Look at the tiny little stems. There's no food there. You're not going to be able to feed anybody there. Never enough. There's no growth. Those are very tiny plants. Well, if we have no water and it's dry and it looks empty, there's no food growing, so nothing's going to happen here. We have nothing. This empty lot here is absolutely nothing. So if we put our scarcity hat on, we're thinking of all the things it does not have. We're back to this picture again. If we think of the opposite of scarcity, think in your head, what's that word? Well, abundancy. So abundancy or abundance means there's always going to be more. There's plenty. We have a bunch. We have everything. We have more than we can handle. We have everything we need. So now take your hat again. You put the scarcity hat aside. Get your abundancy hat. Put that on. Think of your abundancy hat on and think about there's plenty. There's a lot. Now what do you see in this picture? Take a good look at the picture. Look all around. There's many rows of plants. There's power. If you look at the power grid in the back, there's going to be lots of food. Look at all the rows of plants. It's green. Look at the back trees and the back part of it there. That means there's water. If there's growth, there's water. Plus, even the plants are small, it's still green. So there is water. You just don't see it going, but that does show that there's water. And you see the plants are growing. And that means there's going to be an abundance of food. Now you're trying to figure out, well, what does scarcity and abundance and this big field have to do with communicating and making connections? This is identifying what it means to understand our filters. If we put the scarcity hat on, we are always going to think of what is not going well. If we put the abundance hat on, we're going to focus on the positive and what we can do. Go back to the team meeting. You were head listening. When you're head listening, most likely you have your scarcity hat on. The manager brings up the story, says, we're going to do a new form. You automatically went to it will never work. Start making excuses if this isn't going to go well. But if you put your scarce or abundance hat on, you're going to focus on, okay, I want to see where this is going. How can this help our students? Ask questions. Think of the positive. What is the impact this is going to make? This is going to really benefit our students and help them be successful. So making those connections, if you look at the picture on the left there, right? We want to make those connections while we're communicating is understanding those filters. So if you're sitting in a meeting and all of a sudden some negative thoughts is going and that you need to pause for a moment and go, okay, I have my scarcity hat on. My filter is going to the negative. Why? And what can you do to change that? Put that abundance hat on. Focus, listen to understand what are they saying. Get rid of the head listening because that's what's probably jumping into your head where you're going to get that scarcity hat on. And so you want to understand those filters and then understand your mindset. Again, the positive mindset, you're going to be more successful. That's a whole other workshop I do too, by the way. We'll do that next year. And we want to focus on the mindset, the positivity. You put that abundance hat on because that's going to influence how you make those connections and how you move that communicating with others forward for positive results. So understanding your filters is a great way to focus on the things that we're doing well and where this is going. Listening to understand. That means be here now. So when you're listening to understand, you need to be fully present. That doesn't mean you're just sitting there staring at the person. You're talking and I'm listening and I'm just staring at you. No emotion, just glaring at you. Maybe not saying a word. If you're the person sending the message and I'm the recipient, and I'm just not saying a word, no emotion, no body language, not repeating anything, the person sending the message is not going to know if I'm listening or not. So when you're listening to understand, you want to be fully present. And that could be if somebody's telling a story, if somebody's talking about something, you need to make eye contact. You could nod, raise your hand and ask a question. Tune into your own body language to listen to understand, but also if you're the messenger and you're sending the message, tune into the body language of the people in the room. Now, I've been facilitating for many, many years, and it's a little different when you're virtual. When I do my workshops, usually I have everybody's cameras on because I usually do live workshops, and I try to pay attention to people's body language. And especially when it's in person, I can understand a little more. If I see people with their arms crossed and they're looking over here, or they're looking down on their phones, then I've lost them. So I'm going to need to switch that up and figure, okay, where did I lose them and how do I get them back on track? So it's the same thing in a team meeting. It's the same thing in any type of presentation that you're doing, or just a casual conversation with somebody. You want to read where they're at. Are they listening to understand you? And if not, ask questions. So you want to influence the person who's listening to you, right? And that could be to ensure they're listening to understand by asking questions, paying attention to their body language. For yourself, you're the one that's wanting to make the connection, and you're listening to understand whoever's speaking. So you're listening to me right now, and you're trying to understand what I'm saying right now. You're looking at the slide. You're seeing some words on the slide. You're listening to my voice. Of course, I have a little bit of hand motion here because that's just what I do. You want to be open to being influenced. So you participating in this workshop, you came in here with an open mind thinking, okay, what am I going to learn today about communicating for connections? And I'm hopeful that you're listening to understand, and hopeful that you're being open to being influenced, and that you take something from this presentation. Now, if you're sitting here multitasking, and we've all been guilty of that, especially in the virtual world, you're probably not listening to understand the entire presentation. So again, that goes to our filters. How many of you, and obviously you're not going to answer right now, but think about it, but how many of you have been in a meeting and you're multitasking, you're answering emails, somebody's speaking in the Zoom room, and you're multitasking and you are not listening to understand? That's part of your filter of, I have way too many things to do. I'm tired of Zoom meetings. And so I'm just going to pretend to be here. So we have to be aware of that and minimize that. And be here now is the best 3 words. And I actually have that on my screen to remind myself to be here now, even though we've been doing this virtual. The Chancellor's Office has been working from home, just like many of you working from home, is to minimize those distractions, be here now, and make sure that I am participating 100% to listen to understand and to help us be successful. And again, we talked into tuning into emotions and the body language, and being open to being influenced. Not only listening to understand is important, but another area that you need to understand is empathy. The power of empathy will fuel any connection. And we're going to watch a short video right now. And hopefully you're all listening to understand. And no, we're not going to ask a question about the bus driver's age at the end.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I had a, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
That was a wonderful video by Dr. Brene Brown. It really shows the power of empathy. And one of the key things, and especially because we work with our students, empathy is going to go a long way. We've all have maybe been at that time where we're learning something new, we're navigating something new, we're struggling in something. And so we never want to go back to our students and say something as, well, at least you can take that class over again. You know, we have to understand and listen to who we connect with, who we're speaking with, and put the power of empathy in there so that we can make those connections and fuel that connection, as we saw on the video. So taking the other person's perspective. And we definitely do not want to be judgmental, right? So you do not judge people. The other thing is recognize the other person's emotion. Things happen and they might be upset. And you're thinking, why are they upset? I wouldn't be upset over this. You're not them. Understanding empathy is recognizing it's okay on that other person's emotion. Communicate how the other person's feeling. I'm just glad you told me. Understand empathy will make those connections, not only with your peers and coworkers, but especially with the students that we work with. So when we're making connections, delivery is the key, right? If I'm speaking to you right now and we're having a one-on-one conversation, and I'm going to pick up my phone right now and I'm talking to you and you're like, oh, go ahead. Oh, yeah. Right? This is not a very good delivery. I am not paying attention to you. I'm not listening to understand. I am not making those connections. If you make a mistake and you didn't connect with somebody, maybe you weren't present, go back to them. Say, I didn't quite understand everything you said. Can we talk about this again? And I am going to be here now for you. Be open and honest in a positive manner. And I'm going to always repeat that because positivity fuels success. And being open and honest is okay. If it's constructive, that's fine. But be open and honest on the things that you hear, and you're going to build that trust. And if it's positive, it's going to fuel success and make those connections. Now you're wondering, how can I continue to make connections, right? Through communication. We communicate, again, through many different ways, whether it's in a team meeting, whether it's informal, passing somebody in the hall, which we're not doing right now, but we will be soon. Connecting with others in virtual meetings. One of the biggest ways to make connections is understanding when you matter, when other people matter. Making connections is saying you matter. But we're going to first look at an example of when I did not matter. There are two things. What I thought did not matter, and when I did something, it did not matter. So when I suggested one day, my example is when I suggested one day that we start the day with a daily rally, maybe do some personal challenges to motivate people. He or she, my boss, said, we have way too much work to do. That's not going to help us. So my idea didn't matter. I created a new form that would decrease customer wait time. My boss took it and I never heard a response. So I took the effort to do something in a positive manner and I did not get a response. So what I did not matter. Now, what I want you to do is think of a time of when you thought of something, you had an idea and it did not matter. Or think of a time that you did something and it did not matter. You didn't feel like it mattered. How did that make you feel? The things that make you feel, you probably think, well, I'm not good enough. They don't care about me. I'm not valued as a person. And this could be personal or professional. How does this make you feel? And I'm sure it made you feel crummy. And again, not valued. Now we're going to flip the script a little bit. And as we talk about this, we're going to bring this back to how this makes connections by communicating. Think about, and here's the example of when I did matter. I asked my boss if I could test out a new equipment layout. My boss said, hey, use your best judgment, get some feedback from others, and then make the recommendation. So I had an idea. I presented it, got some feedback on how I should move forward. Doesn't mean it's going to go into play, but at least my idea was thought of and I mattered. Something I did, my members on my project team planned a surprise party for me after I worked 4 weeks and weekends to create a new workflow design. They recognized the extra effort that I did. Now, I'm not saying anytime anybody goes extra effort, you're throwing a big party, but it's that acknowledgement that they recognize that I did something and it mattered. So think about now a time when something you thought of or something you did mattered. How did that make you feel? Valued, elated, happy, positive vibes, worth something, successful. Lots of emotions are going to come in when what you did or what you thought mattered. Now you're thinking, how do I communicate to make those connections with others? We just talked about when you did something that mattered or when you thought of something that mattered, how that made you feel, right? Great. Now you're the one, flip the script. What others think and what others do matters. That builds the connections. Somebody comes in with an idea. And I know we do this right now, especially in the virtual. We have a Slack chit chat and quick little messages that we can do on the computers, and also within our team meetings. People will put ideas. Acknowledge that. That is a really interesting article that you shared. Thanks for sharing with this. We should probably discuss this a little more. I took the time to put an article in our little video chat. They read it because I took the time, so they acknowledged that. And now they're like, well, this is a really good idea. Let's talk about it some more. So I contributed and I felt valued. As we're trying to communicate to be effective and make those connections and build those connections, we need to make sure that we are valuing people by what they do and what they think. What they do and what they think matters. If you follow that simple concept, no matter where you are in your professional career, you will continue to be successful and you will build up the people around you to be successful because you're making those connections. We've covered a lot of stuff going on here. Understanding diversity. we're all different ducks, right? That it influences our filters. It influences how we can communicate. We want to master our communication skills, whether it's verbal, whether it's written, or whether it's body language. We want to listen to understand. Again, listen to understand. Everybody's a different duck, different filters. All those things come into play. Be here now when you're listening to understand. Do not make assumptions. Listen to understand whatever somebody is communicating to you. And we want to make those connections through empathy. Remember, empathy fuels connections. Look at their perspective. Understanding our filters, where we come from, what we do, others we interact with. Being open and honest. And one of the key things is what I think and what I do matters. Not only you want that for yourself, but you want to help that with the people that you communicate with. I want to listen to you. I want to hear you. And I'm going to acknowledge that what you're thinking and what you're doing matters. When you do that, your connection's going to be strong. Now, I added a couple of slides on this in the just recently because we're in the virtual world. Look at these two pictures. The picture on the left has 0 video. All we see is names and 2 people have pictures. The video or the picture on the right is I'm screenshotting it, is a virtual meeting and everybody has their cameras on. If you look about that and you look at these two, timeout. If you look at these 2 pictures that I took in the virtual world, you'll see that you cannot make any connection with the group on the left, except to if they actually speak, which I've been in many meetings where most people do not speak, and if they put something in chat. Where the photo on the right, you can see you're making those connections. They're staring at the camera. You're staring at the camera. You can see their emotions, their non-verbal communication. You know if they're being here now. I actually make it mandatory for my team when we're in meetings. Everybody has to have the camera on unless there's a connectivity issue or a kid issue. We've had those as well. There's definitely exceptions, but majority of the time, you need to have your cameras on. We want to make those connections. You cannot make the connection with the picture on the left. Working from home has its perks. Don't get me wrong, but I am an office person, but it does have its perks. But are we missing those connections and how we communicate? So one of the things I just wanted to bring up on this was when you're having virtual meetings or virtual conversations, turn those cameras on, make that connection with the body language, visual, not only just the verbal. Be here now means being here now and not multitasking during your communication with others. We're to the end here. And what steps are you going to take to open that door to connect to others through your communication? Is that if you're in the virtual environment still, turning on that video camera so when you're in meetings and connecting with others? Is it when you're in person, making sure any distractions are set away? You're asking follow-up questions. You're listening to the whole story. You're not head listening. You're understanding and you're asking questions. That tells the person that you're communicating with that you value what they're thinking and what they're saying or what they're doing. Communicating, people think it's just words. There's more to it to make those connections. When we make connections, we're going to be successful. When we're working with our students who are just beginning their endeavor in life, we want to make those connections because that's going to help them be successful and help you be successful. So when we're communicating, it's not just here's the instructions, go do this and that. there could be more to that story, and you want to make sure that you're exploring everything and understanding body language, what the person's saying, maybe understanding where their mindset is at, understanding where your mindset is at, and understanding your filters. Remember, we're all different ducks. And so one of the things, you're going to get a participant guide after this, and you're going to get some of these concepts that we talked about today, and you're going to get some examples that you can then write out your own script of how can you be here now, right? How do you bring forward what I do and what I think matters with others? How do you value what other people do and what other people think matters? So the participant guide is just for you, gives an overview of everything we talked about today. A lot of this is very simple concepts, but with our world that we get caught up and go so quick and we forget certain things, and we do forget that we're all different ducks, and we all have different things going on in our life that influence how we communicate. But we want to make sure, if we're valuing others and we want to continue to be successful, that we're making those connections. And when we make those connections, we will be successful. So I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. I hope that you were able to take something away from here that you can apply not only in your professional life, but in your personal life. And as always, you will receive my email, and you can always reach out if you have any other questions or want to talk about something or clarify, because what you think matters to me, and I want to be here for you. Thank you and have a great day.